What's the most common name for God? What would you say? Adonai. Ta-da! Eddie, you're good. You're quick. Adonai. Yud He Vav He. Now, I will give $5, not tonight, not on Shabbat, but to the person who can tell me the biblical grammatical name in English of this word, this four-letter word. Go ahead. Mr. Schlesinger. Jehovah, that is good, yes. That is good, yes, and acceptable, but you don't get the $5. David, Jehovah, it's all good, but it's not going to be that. Yes. Yahweh, good. Let's get off of Yahweh, Jehovah. It begins with a T. Did I hear somebody? Professor? Huh? Very close. The tetragrammaton. The tetragrammaton is the four-letter word of Yud He Vav He. And we call it Adonai because we actually can't pronounce it. So Jehovah, Yahweh, it's not pronounceable. And for those who know a little bit of Hebrew, there's past tense, present tense, and future tense. This has all three tenses all in once. You'll often hear it translated in the Bible, in the book of Exodus, Ehiyeh asher ehiyeh. I am that which I am, I will be that which I will be, and I was that which I was. I love that translation, even though it's a little cumbersome. So the ancient rabbis simply decided to call it Adonai so that we wouldn't try and say something we couldn't really pronounce. How many names of God do you think there are? 72 is a good. Who said 72? Very nice. 72 in the Kabbalistic tradition, that is true, yes? A lot. That's a great answer. Eddie, let's go to the next screen. Well, there's 34 on this screen, and the next, 104 names. Just as a cursory reading, you can't read all of them, but trust me, they're all legit. They come from the Talmud, from the Kabbalah, from the Bible, from our prayers, all different kinds of names of God. I want to talk to you about three names today. Three names, and this is the reason I want to talk about it, because what I realize from Tat Shabbat to here, to even when we're dealing with people at the end of their lives, we talk about being created in God's image. And, you know, in passing, that's kind of a beautiful thing to say, but what does it mean? My wife often, after asking or thinking of a question in a really thoughtful way, will say, and what's the so what? So what do you do with that? What does that mean? How do you enact that? How do you make that become real in a person's life? So be created in God's image is something we have to actualize. It's nice for the rabbi to say it. It's nice for you to hear it. And then you go home and it never comes to be. So I'd like to offer you three names of God that if we embodied these names, that the so what might be, you make a difference. You make a difference. Let's go to the first one, Ed. The first one is a modern Hebrew word known as makom. Makom simply means the place. Hamakom means the place. And this Hebrew word is also a word for God. You see it come up in the Talmud a lot, where God is the place. But I want to translate it slightly differently, and I want to say show up. Too many of us give lip service to saying, oh, that's my good friend, or yes, I have, what can I do to help? Or, you know, let me figure out and I'll give you a call. My people will call your people and we'll do lunch. And then it never happens. It never happens. Part of being God-like is showing up. Showing up for yourself, for each other, for community, for your family. Just being there. Just being there. You know, I have children in their 20s, and I often tell them, and this has happened now 2 or 3 times, where somebody, one of their friends' parents or grandparents has passed away, and they say, "Dad, should I go to the funeral?" I said, "Absolutely go to the funeral." "Well, my presence won't make a difference." I said, "Nobody ever forgets, the mourner never forgets who showed up and who didn't show up." It's totally true. Even if it's a tangential relationship, your presence means something. You are bringing godliness to that space and to that place. It's the joke I always make about bar and bat mitzvahs, and that is, if you're going to go to the bar mitzvah party, you better show up to the service. I am losing this battle, I just want to tell you, but I really feel so strongly about it, it makes me crazy. Showing up matters. It really matters. And there are thousands, a billion examples we could use. And I know it because of also the times we don't show up. And we know in the back of our mind we should have. And then we feel badly about it. So if you want to be godlike, if you want to bring God's image in which we were all created to this world, show up. Even if you weren't asked. Even if you weren't asked. You know, sometimes people who are feeling ill don't want to entertain people. And calling and asking, "What can I do for you?" is very lovely and comes from a very good place. It's much better to make the matzo ball soup, put it on the doorstep, send a text and say, "There's matzo ball soup waiting for you." That's a way of showing up. That's a way of showing up without even being asked. So showing up is really important. What's the next slide there, Eddie? Shekhinah. It's often translated as the indwelling presence. Can also be, in modern Hebrew, a neighborhood. It's like the place people kind of gather. But it's, somebody said Kabbalah earlier. It also has the definition of the feminine, excuse the stereotype, nurturing side of God. Nurturing side of God. And so for me, when I look at this word, I think to myself, it means be present. There's one thing to show up, very powerful. But then when you show up and you're on your phone the whole time, it's not really being present. You know that story I've told 1,000 times? I'll tell it again because I love this story because it's so illustrative. Little kid made a painting and goes up to the mom who's doing the dishes. Mommy, look at my painting. She's doing the dishes. She says, "It's great. It's great." He says, "But you're not looking at it." She goes, "No, it's fantastic." She goes, "You're not listening to me with your eyes." It's a really powerful thing to think about. We can hear the words, but if we're not connecting one person to the other by being present, then we're missing the boat. That's the negative way to say it. The positive way to say it is just be there. Put your concerns aside and only deal with that person's concerns. It's hard for us to do. And I'm guilty, number one, of it. But being present is really, really, really something of bringing God's nature to this world. We talk about spirituality a lot. What does it mean to be a spiritual person? It means being present. Not for your own needs often, but for others' needs. I see people in this audience in the healing professions here, which is really lovely. And there's a phrase we use to be a non-anxious presence often. Which means it's not about what you're feeling, it's about taking in what somebody else is feeling. But you know, that's a good theory for just living, for being a compassionate, gracious, warm person. Because here's what's going to happen. One day we're going to need somebody to be present for us. We're going to need somebody to show up and then to be present and look me in the eyes and say, "I gotcha." In fact, the definition of love, marital love, I think, is being held gently in somebody's hands without feeling judged and being totally vulnerable. That's a tough combination, to be vulnerable and not to be judged by the person who's holding you gently in their hands. And so being present is such a powerful way to bring God's essence to this world. And by the way, we'll all do it in different ways. One of my favorites is when granddad gets down on the ground and does Legos with the 5-year-old. That's being present. Or when a grandma goes to take the baby out of mom's hands because mom is overwhelmed beyond belief and needs 20 minutes of alone time. That's reading the situation. That's understanding it. Being present is being with the person suffering with Alzheimer's and engaging in the same conversation you've had 37,000 times and pretending it's the first. That's being present. And so showing up is the first. Got to get there. And then you got to be present. And the last way I would say, we didn't change the Hebrew up there. That's a bummer. The Hebrew doesn't say rat rumah. It's supposed to say yotzer or. Sorry, it changed when it switched computers. Yotzer or, which is a prayer Sam is going to read tomorrow morning. I told you Ma'ariv Aravim is the prayer that thanks God for bringing the evening. Yotzer or thanks God for bringing the light. Maker of light. And there are lots of ways for us to enact this in our world, in our lives, of being a positive person, of being a person who gives hope. And the best way to give hope, by the way, is connected to the first two, showing up and being present. There's nothing more hopeful than somebody showing up, being present, which the message is, there's light in my life. I have somebody before me who's showing me light. If I closed the lights here and we had darkness all over the windows and I lit a match, that one match would light up this whole room. And then I'd see the faces of those who showed up and are present. So giving light is really equal to the first two. There are other ways to do it, being very careful with one's words. So we don't ever say anything cliche, don't ever say anything trite, even if they have meaning. Measuring our words is really important because we believe that God, when God spoke, God was very succinct and very directed in the way God spoke. So too should we be. In fact, Sam's going to talk about a little bit about that tomorrow, about the way we use our words and how that can be the most hurtful weapon or the most beautiful blessing we can employ in our relationships. So friends, I invite you, and I invite myself as I say these words, to show up hamakom, to be shekhinah, that is to be present, and then yotzer or, yotzer or, maker of light, to be a person who gives light, who shows up, who's present, and who speaks thoughtfully and kindly and shows people the way. I invite all of us to be like God, to be created in God's image and bring forth that image. Amen.